My name is Colonel James Barrett, retired from the United States Air Force. My serial number is 478-44-9823. I'm recording this on September 15th, 2024. Tomorrow is Prisoners of War and Missing in Action Remembrance Day, and my 50-year confidentiality agreement expires at midnight. What I'm about to tell you is not in any official record. It is not in the Pentagon papers, nor is it in any declassified documents you can request through FOIA. This is why 1,584 American soldiers are still listed as missing in Southeast Asia, and why some of us who returned home are told to forget the 2 years that are not in our files. On November 18, 1968, I was shot down over North Vietnam. I was flying an F-4 Phantom II from Da Nang Air Base, carrying out a bombing mission over the Than Hoa Bridge. It was my 97th mission. I had only 3 missions left to complete. If I could complete these missions, I would be reunited with my wife Sarah and my 2 sons. Before continuing, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. This is very important to us, and we would be very grateful. The North Vietnamese anti-aircraft fire was intense that day. We called it the Golden BB, that one lucky shot that finds its mark. Mine hit the fuel line. My weapons officer, Lieutenant Danny Morrison, and I ejected at about 8,000 feet. I watched Danny's chute deploy below me, white against the green jungle canopy. I never saw him again. He's still listed as MIA. The Viet Cong were waiting when I hit the ground. They'd been tracking our descent, and I barely had time to release my chute before they were on me. The initial beating was systematic, professional. They wanted me alive but compliant. A rifle butt to the solar plexus, kicks to the kidneys, enough to take the fight out of me but not enough to cause permanent damage. They needed me functional for what came next. The march to Hanoi took 11 days. We moved at night, hiding during the day in village huts or jungle camps. They paraded me through villages where people threw stones and spit. I learned later this was orchestrated, part of the psychological breaking process. Make you feel hated, isolated, dependent on your captors for protection. On November 29, 1968, I arrived at Hoa Lo Prison, what we called the Hanoi Hilton. The massive wooden doors closing behind me sounded like the end of everything I'd known. The French had built it in 1901 to hold Vietnamese political prisoners. By 1968, it housed hundreds of American POWs in conditions that violated every article of the Geneva Convention. They put me in New Guy Village first, the section where they processed recent arrivals. The cell was 7 feet by 7 feet, concrete walls, a concrete bed with leg irons, a bucket for waste. The window was boarded up except for a small ventilation hole near the ceiling. The temperature was either stifling hot or bone-chilling cold. Never comfortable. The interrogation started immediately. They wanted military information, targets, flight patterns, radio frequencies. When I gave them nothing but name, rank, and serial number, they introduced me to what they called the ropes. Your arms are tied behind your back, then the rope is thrown over a beam and you're hoisted until your shoulders dislocate. They leave you there for hours. The pain is indescribable. Most men break. I did. We all did eventually. But this isn't a story about torture. Every prisoner of war who survived Hanoi has that story. This is about what happened in the 7th cell block, and why 37 American servicemen chose to stay missing rather than come home. I first heard about the 7th block during my 3rd week. I was in solitary, what we called Heartbreak Hotel, when I heard the tap code on my wall. We all learned it quickly, a simple grid system where you tap out letters to communicate. First taps for the row, pause, then taps for the column. It was our lifeline, our way to maintain sanity and military structure even in isolation. The message was unusual. Stay away from 7. I tapped back. Who this? Robinson, 1965. That stopped me cold. 1965 was 3 years ago. The longest-held POWs were legendary among us, survivors who'd endured what we were just beginning. But the next part made no sense. They still counting me. I tapped, where you? 7 block, they won't let us die. Before I could respond, guards burst into my cell. They'd heard the tapping. As they dragged me out for punishment, I saw them. 2 guards heading toward a section of the prison I'd never noticed before, carrying rice bowls. Enough bowls for a dozen men, but that section was supposedly empty, damaged in a bombing raid. The punishment was 3 days in the black box, a metal container in the courtyard, too small to stand up or lie down in. In the suffocating darkness, I had time to think about Robinson's message. They won't let us die. What did that mean? When they let me out, barely conscious from dehydration, they moved me to a different section called the zoo. My new cellmate was Major Tom Garrett, Air Force, shot down in 1967. Tom had been there long enough to know the unwritten rules, the things you didn't talk about even in tap code. You heard about 7 blocks, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Tom was quiet for a long moment, then, there were 3 escape attempts in 1965. All failed. The men involved were supposed to be executed. That's what the guards told us. But sometimes, late at night, you can hear them, tapping. Always the same message. Still here, still counting. Counting what? Days, we thought at first. But the numbers don't match. Last week, someone tapped out 5,847. If they're counting days since 1965, it should be around 1,200. That night, unable to sleep on the concrete slab, I listened. The prison was never truly quiet. Someone was always screaming, crying, praying. But underneath it all, I heard it. Faint, rhythmic tapping. I counted along, 5,848, 5,849, 5,850. The next morning, during our 10 minutes of washing time, I saw something that officially doesn't exist. A guard I didn't recognize was leading a line of prisoners from the direction of Block 7. They moved wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. They walked in perfect unison, like they were all hearing the same rhythm. Their eyes were open but unfocused, and they were all mouthing something silently in sync. Tom grabbed my arm. Don't look. Don't ever look directly at them. Who are they? The uncounted, he whispered. Men who are listed as MIA but are still here. Men who should have died but didn't. Men who... He stopped as a guard approached. That guard was Sergeant Tran, one of the few who spoke English. He looked at me with something I'd never seen in a guard's eyes before. Fear. You saw them, he said quietly in accented English. You should not have seen them. Seen who? He leaned closer. The ones who volunteered for the special program. The ones your government sent medicine for. The ones who cannot die now. Before I could ask more, he walked away quickly, but his words stuck. Your government sent medicine. That night, the tap code network went crazy. Messages flew between cells. New guy saw 7 block. Shut it down. They will move him. Or worse. Tom was grim. You've seen too much. They'll either kill you, move you to 7, or what? Or make you forget. The next morning, I woke up in a different cell. Not just a different cell, a different section of the prison. My head was pounding, and there was a bandage on my left arm, right over the vein, track marks from needles. 3 days were missing from my memory. My new cellmate was Captain Richard "Rick" Lawson, Navy pilot, captured in 1966. He took one look at me and sighed. "They dosed you," he said. "Same thing happened to me last year. You probably saw something you shouldn't have. The 7th block, the uncounted prisoners." Rick's face went pale. "Jesus, you saw them? Actually saw them?" I nodded. "Then we need to talk. But not here, not now. During exercise time. The guards avoid the southwest corner of the yard. Too much sun reflection off the wall. It blinds them for about 10 minutes around noon." Those 10 minutes changed everything I understood about my captivity, about the war, about what my government was willing to sacrifice. Rick had been a test subject before his capture. Not willingly. He'd been part of a vitamin program at Naval Air Station Pensacola that turned out to be something else entirely. They were testing psychological compounds, he told me, speaking quickly, quietly. Drugs that were supposed to make us better soldiers. More resistant to interrogation. More resistant to fear. More resistant to death. That's insane, is it? Think about it. What's the biggest problem with POWs from a military standpoint? We break. We give up information. We die, and our knowledge dies with us. But what if you could create soldiers who couldn't break because their minds could partition information? Who couldn't die because their bodies would enter a kind of stasis when severely damaged? You're talking about super soldiers. No, I'm talking about something worse. I'm talking about men who can't die but aren't really alive either. Men who exist in a state between life and death, constantly counting because numbers are the only thing that keeps them anchored to reality. He pulled up his sleeve, showing me scars I recognized. Injection sites, but old ones, healed over years ago. 5 of us from the test program were shot down in '66, he continued. They put us all in Block 7 initially. Called it a medical quarantine. But something went wrong. The drugs, combined with the torture, the malnutrition, the psychological pressure, it activated something. Changed us. Changed how? Henderson was first. They beat him so badly his heart stopped. The guards confirmed it. No pulse for 5 minutes. They were about to remove his body when he sat up. But he wasn't right. He could respond to questions, could move, could eat, but it was like he was operating on autopilot, like his consciousness was somewhere else, and his body was just going through the motions. That's not possible. I watched it happen. Then Martinez. Then Cole. One by one, the test subjects would hit a breaking point, death or near death, and come back wrong. The North Vietnamese didn't know what to do. They couldn't release us in prisoner exchanges because we were evidence of something. So they kept us separated, hidden. But you're here. You're normal. Rick laughed bitterly. Am I? Barrett, what year is it? 1968. To you, maybe. To me, I've lived this same month 17 times. My mind keeps resetting to November 1966, right before I was supposed to enter Block 7. The only reason I can even have this conversation is because I write myself notes, hide them, find them again. Look, he showed me his arm, covered in tiny scars that I'd assumed were from torture. But looking closer, I could see they formed patterns. Letters, words, carved into his own skin so he couldn't forget. Don't trust the food on Wednesdays. They watch through the cracks at night. Remember Block 7. You are Rick Lawson. You are real. The North Vietnamese made a deal, Rick continued. Our government would report us as MIA, never confirm our capture. In exchange, they'd provide medical supplies to keep us stable. keep us from deteriorating further. Both sides get to study what we've become. That's treason. That's a war crime. Is it? We volunteered for the initial program. We signed waivers. We agreed to serve our country in any capacity necessary. And technically, we're not being tortured anymore. We're being maintained, studied, counted. The counting, every heartbeat, that's what they count. The uncounted ones, they're aware of every single heartbeat because it's the only thing that reminds them they exist. $5,850. That's 5,850 heartbeats. In an hour, they'll tap out 350,000. By tomorrow, 500,000. It's the only thing that keeps them tethered to this reality. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my concrete bed feeling my own heartbeat, suddenly hyper-aware of it. 1, 2, 3, 4. How many until I lost count? How many until counting was all I had left? The tapping started again around midnight, but this time, it wasn't numbers. It was a message. Barrett. I sat up. That was my name being tapped. Barrett, Block 7, tomorrow. Tom, my previous cellmate, had warned me this might happen. Once you knew about Block 7, you either joined them or no one really knew what the other option was. I tapped back. Who is this? All of us. The tapping came from everywhere, above, below, from every wall. The entire prison was relaying the same message. All of us, Block 7, tomorrow. Rick was awake too, pressed against the wall, listening. They want you to see, he said. Once you see the full truth, you either join them or you become a problem that needs to be solved. What should I do? Survive, he said, simply. That's all any of us can do. Survive and hope that someday someone will believe the truth. The next morning, Sergeant Tran came for me. He didn't say anything, just gestured for me to follow. We walked through sections of the prison I'd never seen. Older parts, French colonial architecture crumbling from decades of humidity and neglect. The walls were covered in graffiti, not in Vietnamese but in French, Chinese, Japanese, layers of occupation and suffering. Finally, we reached a heavy wooden door marked with warnings in multiple languages. The newest sign in English read, Medical Isolation Unit, Authorized Personnel Only. Tran produced a key that looked far too modern for this ancient place. Your government provided this lock, he said. They want to make sure only certain people can enter. Or exit. The door opened into a corridor that shouldn't exist. It was clean, almost clinical, with fluorescent lighting that hummed at a frequency that made my teeth ache. The walls were white tile, like a hospital, not the moldy concrete of the rest of the prison. There were 12 cells, 6 on each side. Each had a small window. Tran gestured for me to look. In the first cell was a man I recognized from briefings, Captain John Jack Henderson, shot down in 1965, listed as MIA. He was sitting on a medical-style bed, rocking slightly, counting on his fingers. His lips moved constantly, mouthing numbers. His eyes tracked me as I passed, but there was no recognition, no humanity in them. The second cell held Lieutenant Colonel Robert Martinez. He was standing at perfect attention, had been for God knows how long. His muscles should have given out. He should have collapsed. But he stood there rigid, unblinking, like a statue made of flesh. The third cell was the worst. Master Sergeant David Cole was writing on the wall with his fingernail, which had worn down to the quick. He was writing numbers. The entire cell was covered in them, floor to ceiling. Blood from his destroyed fingers streaked the walls, but he kept writing, kept counting. Tran stopped me at the fourth cell. Inside was someone who looked almost normal, a young Air Force captain sitting at a small metal desk, writing in what appeared to be a journal. He looked up when he saw me, and his eyes were clear, lucid. "New arrival?" he asked, his voice rusty from disuse. "Or just touring?" "Touring, I think," I replied. He laughed, a sound like sandpaper. "That's what I thought too. I'm Captain William Cross, shot down August 1965. Part of the original test group from Project Mongoose. I'd heard whispers of Mongoose, a CIA program that supposedly dealt with enhanced interrogation resistance. "You seem okay." "I'm the control," he said. "Every experiment needs one. I got the placebo, sugar water and B vitamins, while the others got the real stuff. I'm here to document what happens to them. 3 years now, and I've filled 47 notebooks. Document for who? Does it matter? CIA, Pentagon, maybe the North Vietnamese. Everyone wants to understand what we've created here." He gestured to the other cells. "Do you know what the worst part is? They're still in there. Henderson, Martinez, Cole. Their consciousness is still present, buried under layers of chemical programming and psychological fracturing. Sometimes, late at night, I hear them trying to break through. They tap out messages that aren't numbers, names of their kids, their wives, baseball scores they're trying to remember. But by morning, it's back to counting." Tran interrupted. "Enough. You've seen. Now you must decide." "Decide what?" Captain Cross answered for him. "Whether you join the study or become part of the problem that needs containment. And if I refuse both?" Tran and Cross exchanged looks. "There is no refusing," Tran said. "Your government and mine have an agreement. The research must continue. The only choice is your level of participation." They led me to a medical examination room at the end of the corridor. It was absurdly well equipped for a POW camp. EKG machines, surgical tools, medications with English labels. A Vietnamese doctor was waiting, along with someone who shocked me to my core, an American in civilian clothes. "Colonel Barrett," the American said, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, Central Intelligence Agency. I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting." I didn't shake his hand. "You're supposed to be getting us out, not experimenting on us. The situation is more complex than you understand. What we've discovered here could change the nature of warfare. Soldiers who can't be broken under interrogation. Operatives who can survive catastrophic injury. The implications—" "These men are zombies," I shouted. "They're counting their heartbeats because it's all they have left." Dr. Webb adjusted his glasses. "The current subjects, yes, have had suboptimal outcomes. But that's why we need fresh data. Healthy subjects who haven't been compromised by extended torture and malnutrition. Subjects like you. Go to hell. Colonel, you've already been exposed. When you were unconscious for 3 days, we administered the baseline compounds. You're already part of the study. The only question is whether you participate willingly or not." I felt the blood drain from my face. The injection sites on my arm suddenly burned with new meaning. "What did you give me?" "A cocktail of experimental neurotropics and classified psychoactive compounds. Don't worry, it's a refined version, much safer than what the 1965 group received. You won't end up like them. Probably." "Probably?" Dr. Webb pulled out a folder filled with medical charts. "There have been 23 subjects total. 5 from the original Mongoose group, 18 acquired after capture. Of those, 7 experienced complete psychological dissolution, the counters as we call them. 4 achieved a stable dissociative state where they can function but have no emotional response to stimuli. 6 died, though it took considerably longer than it should have. 3 experienced what we call temporal displacement, They believe they're living in different time periods simultaneously. 2 achieved something remarkable: enhanced cognitive function and resistance to physical trauma without significant psychological degradation. And 1, he paused. 1, we don't talk about. What happened to the 1? Tran spoke up. He escaped, but not in the way you think. His body is still here in cell 12, but his mind, his consciousness, it went somewhere else. He's been catatonic for 2 years, but his brain activity is off the charts. It's like he's living a completely different life somewhere we can't reach. Dr. Webb continued. We need to understand why different subjects react differently. Is it genetic, psychological, environmental? That's where you come in, Colonel. You're an educated man, a trained observer. You can help us understand what's happening from the inside. And if I refuse, then you'll be placed in general population with the knowledge you now have. How long do you think you'll last before you start counting? The brain abhors a vacuum, Colonel. Without purpose, without stimulation, it creates its own. That's what happened to Henderson and the others. They started counting to maintain sanity, and now they can't stop. I was trapped. They knew it, and I knew it. What exactly do you want me to do? Observe. Document. Undergo periodic treatments and report your subjective experiences. Help us refine the process. You mean be your lab rat, if you prefer, but a lab rat with privileges. Better food, medical care, protection from the worst of the interrogations, and most importantly, a chance to maintain your sanity. I agreed. What choice did I have? They moved me to a cell in the medical wing. Still a cell, but cleaner, with an actual cot instead of concrete, and a small desk with paper and pencils. My job was to document everything: my physical sensations, psychological states, dreams, thoughts. They gave me a protocol to follow, exercises to perform, cognitive tests to self-administer. The injections came weekly. Dr. Webb would arrive with his medical bag, always at night, always with Tran as an escort. The compounds burned going in, and afterward I would experience 12 to 24 hours of altered perception. Colors were brighter, sounds had texture, and time became elastic. But it was the dreams that were the worst. I dreamed of home, but it wasn't my home. It was versions of home where things were wrong, where my children had different names, where my wife had never existed, where I had never joined the Air Force. I would wake up unsure which reality was true, having to read my own notes to remember who I was. Captain Cross visited daily, comparing notes. He showed me his documentation of the other subjects. Henderson started normally. He read from an early notebook. First week, standard POW behavior. Week 2, heightened aggression. Week 3, the first death event. Heart stopped for 7 minutes during an interrogation. When he revived, he seemed confused, kept asking what year it was. Week 4, the counting began. Did anyone try to stop it? To break the pattern? Of course. But every intervention made it worse. Physical restraint led to self-harm. Sedation led to waking paranoia. Isolation led to complete catatonia. The counting is their coping mechanism. It's the only thing keeping them tethered to reality, even if that reality is a nightmare. As the weeks passed, I began to notice changes in myself. My injuries healed faster. Cuts that should have taken weeks to heal closed in days. A broken finger from a guard's beating mended overnight. But with the physical improvements came psychological fragmentation. I started losing time, not blacking out exactly, but experiencing moments where I was simultaneously in my cell and somewhere else. Once, I was walking through my house in Colorado Springs, could smell Sarah's perfume, could hear my boys playing in the yard, even as I was aware of sitting in my cell writing. The experiences were so vivid that I began to question which was real. Dr. Webb was fascinated by these episodes. Bilateral consciousness, he called it. Your mind is learning to exist in multiple states simultaneously. This could be breakthrough. Imagine an operative who could gather intelligence while their body is imprisoned or incapacitated. Imagine a human being losing their grip on reality, I countered. Reality is subjective, Colonel. What makes your current experience more real than your episodes? Brain activity, sensory input. By all our measurements, your brain believes both experiences are equally valid. 3 months into the treatment, something happened that changed everything. I was in one of my bilateral episodes, walking through a park in Washington, D.C. that I'd never visited, when I encountered another person who saw me. Not a figment of my fractured consciousness, but another test subject. It was Lieutenant Colonel Martinez from Cell 2, but here, in this other place, he was lucid, normal. Barrett? Jesus Christ, you can see me. Martinez? How is this possible? I don't know. I've been here for, God, I don't know how long. Years? Days? Time doesn't work right here. There are others too. We call it the between. The between? Between life and death. Between sanity and madness. Between here and there. Our bodies are in those cells, but our consciousness, we're here. Wherever here is. He led me through this strange version of DC, where buildings shifted when you weren't looking at them, where the sky was sometimes night and sometimes day in the same moment. We found others, not just from Block 7, but American POWs from other camps, Soviet prisoners from other conflicts, even some who claimed to be from wars that hadn't happened yet. The drugs don't create this place, Martinez explained. They just open a door to it. This is where consciousness goes when Leone can't die but can't truly live. We're refugees from reality. Can we get back? Really get back? Some do, but they're never the same. They bring pieces of the between with them. That's what the counting is. It's not heartbeats. It's moments. Moments where they're here instead of there. Each number is a tiny victory, a second where they've pulled themselves back to their body. I snapped back to my cell, gasping, covered in sweat. Captain Cross was there, shaking me. "You were gone for 3 hours," he said. "Just sitting there, eyes open but nobody home. You kept saying numbers." I realized with horror that I had been counting. Without conscious thought, my lips had been moving, tracking the moments. 1,847, 1,848, 1,849. That night, I made a decision. I had to document everything, not for Dr. Webb or the CIA, but for history. For the families of these men who were listed as missing but were trapped in something worse than death. I began writing in a cipher I'd developed, hiding the real documentation inside the reports I gave to Webb. I wrote about the between, about Martinez and the others I'd met there, about the true nature of what was happening in Block 7. But I also wrote about something else I'd discovered. The North Vietnamese had their own test subjects. Tran had let it slip during one session. They were using captured Soviet compounds on South Vietnamese prisoners, trying to create their own enhanced soldiers. The entire prison had become a laboratory for both sides, a grotesque partnership in the name of military advancement. One night, while in the between, I found the one Dr. Webb wouldn't talk about, the escaped subject. His name was Sergeant First Class Thomas Park, and he had achieved something none of the others had. He had learned to control his bilateral consciousness. "I can be in both places at once," he explained, his form flickering between solid and translucent, fully present in both. I'm in my cell, catatonic to them, but I'm also here, and in a dozen other places. I've been to Moscow, Beijing, Washington. I've sat in on classified meetings, walked through secure facilities. I know things, Barrett. Things that would end this war, and all wars, if anyone would believe me. Why don't you tell them? Tell who? The CIA, who did this to us. The North Vietnamese who profit from our suffering. They all know what they've created. They just don't care. We're acceptable losses in the pursuit of the perfect soldier. Then we have to expose it. When we get home, Park laughed bitterly. You still think you're going home? Barrett, once you've been in the between, you never fully leave. Even if your body makes it back to the States, part of you will always be here, and they know it. Why do you think so many of us are listed as MIA instead of POW? Dead men tell no tales, but missing men just stay missing. He was right. I learned from Dr. Webb's notes, which I'd started reading during my bilateral episodes where I could walk through his office unseen, that there was no plan to repatriate the Block 7 subjects. We were too valuable as ongoing experiments, too dangerous as potential witnesses. The Paris Peace Accords were already being negotiated. Operation Homecoming was being planned. But we weren't on any lists. Officially, we didn't exist. That's when the real horror set in. We weren't prisoners of war. We were voluntary test subjects who had signed our lives away in waivers we'd never read, in programs we'd never fully understood. The North Vietnamese were just the laboratory. Our own government was the scientist, and the experiment was far from over. January 27, 1973. The Paris Peace Accords were signed. Throughout the Hanoi Hilton, there was celebration. Men wept, cheered, embraced each other through the bars of their cells. Freedom was coming. Operation Homecoming would begin in 3 weeks. But in Block 7, there was only silence. Dr. Webb had arrived that morning with a different energy. He was nervous, sweating despite the cool weather. With him were 3 other Americans in civilian clothes and a North Vietnamese general I'd never seen before. The situation has changed, Webb announced to those of us who could still comprehend speech. The war is ending. Prisoners will be exchanged. But you understand that you cannot be included in the official repatriation. Captain Cross laughed bitterly from his cell. So we just disappear? Families never know what happened to us? Your families have already been informed of your deaths, one of the other Americans said coldly. Training accidents mostly. Some combat losses. Clean, honorable deaths. They've had their funerals, received their flags. To resurrect you now would raise questions we cannot answer. I felt something break inside me. Sarah thought I was dead. My boys were growing up without a father. I'd been erased. However, Webb continued, we're not abandoning you. The research must continue, but in a different setting. Those of you who are stable enough will be transferred to a facility in Laos. Neutral territory, better conditions, proper medical care. And those who aren't stable, I asked. Webb didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, they began the selection process. One by one, they evaluated the Block 7 subjects. Henderson, still counting, was deemed non-viable for transport. Martinez, locked in his standing catatonia, same verdict. Cole, whose fingers were now just bloody stumps from his endless writing, would stay. Of the 23 subjects, only 7 of us were selected for transfer. Myself, Cross, Rick Lawson, Park, still catatonic but valuable, and 3 others I'd barely interacted with. The rest would remain in Block 7, officially non-existent, until they died. Or until their bodies finally gave up trying to die. But I had a plan. During my episodes in the between, I'd made contact with someone unexpected. Danny Morrison, my weapons officer from the shoot-down. He wasn't dead. He was in another camp, Sun Tay, and he was scheduled for legitimate repatriation. In the between, consciousness doesn't respect physical distance. We could meet, talk, plan. "I'll carry a message out," Danny promised. "Tell me everything." I gave him names, dates, details about Project Mongoose, about Block 7, about the bilateral consciousness experiments. He memorized it all, using the same techniques we'd used to memorize resistance codes. "They'll never believe me," he said. "Make them believe. File reports. Contact the families. Contact the press if you have to." February 11th, 1973. The night before the transfer. They came for us at 0300 hours. Not the usual guards. These were special forces, American and Vietnamese working together. They sedated us for transport, but the drugs didn't work properly on me anymore. I maintained consciousness, trapped in a paralyzed body, aware of everything happening around me. The convoy didn't go to Laos. We drove for hours through the jungle, ending up at what looked like an abandoned French plantation. But underneath the decaying colonial mansion was a modern facility built into the mountain itself. The entrance was hidden behind a waterfall, the sound covering any noise from within. This wasn't a medical facility. It was a black site. They had subjects from multiple programs here. Not just American POWs, but Soviet advisors, Chinese volunteers, even some Viet Cong who'd been exposed to their own experimental programs. We were all guinea pigs in the same maze, regardless of which flag we'd fought under. My cell, though they called it a room here, was actually comfortable. A real bed, a toilet, a sink, even books. But the testing intensified. Daily injections, hourly monitoring, constant psychological evaluations. They were trying to refine the formula, to create a version that would provide the benefits without the dissociation. Dr. Webb was replaced by a team of scientists led by a woman who only gave her name as Dr. Sarah. She was brilliant, cold, and utterly devoted to the project. "You're the success story, Barrett," she told me during one session. "You can access bilateral consciousness without losing your primary identity. You maintain temporal consistency while experiencing non-linear perception. Do you understand how valuable that makes you?" "I understand that I'm a prisoner being experimented on against my will. Your will became irrelevant when you signed up for experimental vitamin trials in 1967, she replied, showing me a document. My signature was at the bottom, though I had no memory of signing it. Everything we're doing is technically legal. Unethical, perhaps, but legal. The months blended together. Spring became summer, became fall. We heard nothing from the outside world. The war was over, but our war continued in syringes and sensors and endless psychological manipulation. Then Park woke up. Not physically, his body remained catatonic, but in the between, he became fully active, and he'd learned something crucial. The bilateral consciousness wasn't just about existing in two places, it was about existing in two times. "I've been to 1985, he told me during one of our between meetings. 1997, 2010. This doesn't end, Barrett. This program, these experiments, they continue for decades. They perfect it. By the early 2000s, they have soldiers who can operate in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But the cost is astronomical." "What cost?" "Every bilateral consciousness creates a fracture in reality. Small at first, but they compound. By 2015, the fractures are causing what they call temporal bleeding. Past, present, and future overlapping randomly. They try to stop it, but it's too late. The subjects can't be terminated because they exist across multiple timelines. Kill them in one, they persist in others. That's insane, is it? You've been to the between. You've seen how fluid reality becomes there. Now imagine thousands of subjects, all creating fractures, all existing in multiple states. Reality itself becomes negotiable. I didn't want to believe him, but I'd started experiencing it myself. I would have memories of things that hadn't happened yet. I knew when Dr. Sarah would visit before she decided to come. I could see the outcomes of experiments before they were conducted. Cross noticed it too. You're changing, Barrett. Your eyes, sometimes they're looking at things that aren't there, or aren't there yet. He was documenting everything in his journals, which had grown to over 100 volumes. The complete record of what had been done to us, hidden in plain sight as medical documentation. Someone needs to survive this with their mind intact, he said. Someone needs to tell the story. December 1973. Almost a year since the Paris Accords. A new subject arrived, and he brought news from the outside world. The POWs had gone home. There had been parades, celebrations, reunions. But there were also questions. Families of MIA soldiers were organizing, demanding answers. Danny Morrison had kept his promise. He was telling people about Block 7, about the experiments. Most dismissed him as traumatized, delusional, but some believed. Dr. Sarah was concerned. There's too much attention. We may need to accelerate the timeline. I learned what that meant when they started the final phase protocols. Instead of refining the formula to reduce side effects, they were trying to induce full bilateral consciousness in all subjects simultaneously. They wanted to create a unit of soldiers who could operate across multiple dimensions at once, the ultimate in force multiplication. The first test killed 3 subjects outright. Their bodies couldn't handle the strain of existing in multiple states simultaneously. They literally tore apart at a cellular level, dissolving into a kind of organic static. The second test was worse. 5 subjects achieved full bilateral consciousness but lost all connection to their original timeline. Their bodies remained, breathing, eating when fed, but empty. Their consciousness had scattered across infinite possibilities, unable to reassemble into a coherent identity. I was scheduled for Test 3. The night before, Cross came to my room. He'd bribed a guard, one of the Vietnamese who'd been with us since Hanoi, who'd developed something like sympathy for us over the years. I'm getting the journals out, Cross said. All of them. The guard knows someone in the embassy in Bangkok. They'll get them to the press, to Congress, to anyone who will listen. They'll kill you. They're going to kill us all anyway, Barrett. This isn't about creating super soldiers anymore. It's about cleaning up evidence. Why do you think they're pushing so hard for full bilateral consciousness? It's not to use us. It's to scatter us so completely we can never testify to what was done. He was right. I'd seen the termination protocols in Dr. Sarah's files during my between walks through her office. Once the final tests were complete, successful or not, the facility would be destroyed. A training accident, a Viet Cong holdout attack. Something plausible but final. What about the others? Henderson, Martinez, Cole, the ones still in Block 7? Cross's face was grim. They were terminated 3 months ago. Officially, they never existed at all. I felt rage like I'd never experienced. A burning that transcended physical sensation. In the between, My fury manifested as literal flames, buildings burning, reality itself combusting. Park appeared beside me, trying to calm me down. "Channel it," he said. "Use it. You can affect things from here, Barrett. I've been practicing. Watch." He focused on something I couldn't see, and suddenly, in the physical world, alarms began blaring. A fire had started in the laboratory wing. Not a normal fire, but one that burned without heat, consuming equipment and documents while leaving organic matter untouched. How? Bilateral consciousness isn't just about being in two places, Park explained. It's about bringing properties from one reality to another. That fire exists in the between, where thought and reality are the same. I just let it bleed through. We had a weapon, not much of one, but something. The night of Test 3, December 15, 1973, we fought back. As they prepared to inject me with the final dose, I let myself fully enter the between. Not partially, not with one foot in each reality, but completely. My body went catatonic, all monitors flatlining, but my consciousness exploded across dimensions. I found the others, not just Park, but all the subjects who'd been scattered. Henderson was there, no longer counting but conducting the others like a symphony. Martinez stood at attention, not catatonic but commanding. Cole was writing, not numbers but code, programming reality itself with his bloodied fingers. "Now," Henderson commanded, and we struck. Every piece of equipment in the facility failed simultaneously. Not just failed, ceased to exist, phasing out of reality as we pulled them into the between. Documents burst into that cold fire, burning without heat, leaving no ash. The compounds, the formulas, the research. We consumed it all, drew it into our dimension where it couldn't be recovered. Dr. Sarah and her team tried to run, but found the exits didn't lead where they should. Park had learned to fold space in the between, creating loops and recursive corridors. They wandered the facility for hours, always ending up back in the laboratory watching their life's work dissolve into nothingness. But we couldn't sustain it. One by one, we began to fade, our consciousness spreading too thin across too many realities. I felt myself beginning to dissolve, to become just another echo in the infinite corridor of possibilities. Then I heard something that pulled me back. Sarah's voice. Not Dr. Sarah, but my Sarah, my wife. Somehow, in the between, her grief had created a connection, a thread I could follow home. I gathered what remained of my consciousness and pulled, dragging myself back toward a single reality, a single timeline. The others helped, pushing me toward the light, toward life, toward home. I woke up in a hospital in Bangkok, December 25th, 1973, Christmas Day. The official story was that I'd been found by Thai Border Patrol, wandering in the jungle, delirious from malaria. I'd been held by a Pathet Lao splinter group that didn't recognize the Paris Accords, kept in isolation, and had finally escaped when my captors abandoned their camp. It was a good story, plausible, heroic even. The kind of story America wanted to hear about its POWs. The debriefing took 3 months. They kept me at a military hospital in the Philippines, asking the same questions over and over. What did I remember? Who held me? Where was I kept? I gave them the prepared story, the one they wanted to hear. But 3 men in particular knew I was lying. CIA officers who sat in the back of every session, never speaking, just watching. On my last day, one of them finally approached me. Not Dr. Webb or any of the others from the program. Someone new, younger, with dead eyes that had seen too much. "We know what happened at the facility," he said quietly. "The fire, the destroyed research, the missing personnel. we also know it's impossible. The facility was found intact, abandoned, but intact. No fire damage, no missing documents. Everything exactly where it should be, except for the people. Then where is everyone? That's what we'd like to know, Colonel. Dr. Sarah, her entire team, even the other subjects, they're all gone, vanished. The only one we found was you, 300 miles away, with no explanation for how you got there. I knew where they were. They were in the between, trapped in the space they'd tried to weaponize. But I said nothing. There's a story you could tell, the officer continued. A story about experiments, about bilateral consciousness, about things that shouldn't be possible. That story would destroy careers, maybe even bring down governments. It would also destroy you. Your family would be endangered, your pension, your benefits, your life, all gone. Or you go home, reunite with your family, live quietly, never speak of Block 7, of Dr. Webb, of any of it. Sign this. He produced a document, dozens of pages of legal text. 50 years of silence, Colonel. After that, if you're still alive, if anyone still cares, you can tell whatever story you want. I signed. What choice did I have? March 15th, 1974. I stepped off a plane at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. Sarah was there. Older, thinner, but still beautiful. My boys, now teenagers, stood awkwardly beside her. They'd been told I was dead for over 5 years. The reunion was harder than any torture I'd endured. How do you explain 5 years of absence? How do you reconnect with children who've learned to live without you? How do you sleep beside a woman who's already grieved you? But we tried, God, we tried. The first year was the hardest. The nightmares, the episodes where I'd slip into the between without warning. The time Sarah would find me counting, always counting, tracking moments to keep myself anchored. I got treatment at the VA, but not for what really ailed me. They treated me for standard PTSD, for survivor's guilt, for reintegration issues. They had no framework for treating someone whose consciousness had been deliberately fractured and reassembled. Then the letters started arriving. The first was from Cross. He'd made it out somehow and was living under an assumed name in Oregon. His journals had been destroyed in whatever event had closed the facility, but he was rewriting them from memory. Someone needs to document this, he wrote, before we all forget or disappear. The second was from Danny Morrison, my weapons officer. He'd never stopped trying to expose Block 7. He'd been discredited, deemed mentally unstable, forcibly retired. But he kept investigating, finding other families of MIA soldiers who'd received strange stories, impossible sightings, hints that their loved ones were alive long after they'd supposedly died. The third letter had no return address. It was just a photo. Rick Lawson, standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial, dated 1976. Rick had supposedly died in the facility, but there he was, older, grayer, but unmistakably alive. On the back, someone had written, "Still counting. Day 4847. Still here." I started my own investigation, careful, quiet, using skills I'd learned in the between to access information without leaving traces. What I found chilled me. The program hadn't ended. It had evolved. The facility in Laos had been abandoned, yes, but the research continued at multiple sites. Fort Detrick, Area 51, a submarine base in the Arctic. They'd learned from their mistakes. No more POWs, no more unwilling subjects. Now they recruited from terminal patients, people with nothing to lose, offering them a chance at survival in exchange for participation. Some of the new subjects I recognized from the between, consciousness that had been scattered in 1973 but were being slowly reassembled, pulled back into new bodies, recycled test subjects for an endless experiment. By 1980, I'd identified 17 former Block 7 subjects still alive, living under assumed names, scattered across the country. We stayed in contact through coded letters, cryptic phone calls, meetings that looked like chance encounters. We called ourselves the Uncounted. Henderson was in Maine, no longer counting heartbeats but teaching mathematics at a community college, using numbers to stay grounded. Martinez ran a small construction company in New Mexico, building things to prove he could still affect physical reality. Cole had become a writer, channeling his compulsion to document into novels that told our story as fiction. We met once a year, always on November 18th, the anniversary of my shoot-down. Not in person. That would have attracted attention. We met in the between, that strange space we could all still access, where the facility still stood, where Dr. Sarah and her team wandered endless corridors, where the failed experiments counted their way through eternity. In the between, Park was king. He'd learned to shape reality there, creating spaces where we could exist without fracturing further. He showed us things, other experiments, other programs, the true scope of what had been done not just to us, but to hundreds of subjects across decades. They're preparing for something, he told us during one gathering. All these experiments, all these programs, they're building towards something massive. A war not between nations but between realities. They know something's coming, something that will require soldiers who can fight in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When? Henderson asked. 2025, Park replied. Give or take. That's when the barriers become thinnest. That's when whatever they're afraid of breaks through. We debated exposing everything then, going public despite the consequences. But who would believe us? And more importantly, what if Park was right? What if these experiments, horrible as they were preparing for something worse? Years passed. Some of the uncounted died, really died, not the fake deaths of official records. Others disappeared, pulled back into new iterations of the program. By 2000, only 9 of us remained from the original Block 7 subjects. I retired from the Air Force with full honors, a colonel with an exemplary record marred only by 5 years as a POW. Sarah and I grew old together, though she never fully understood the man who'd come back to her. My boys had families of their own, and I tried to be a good grandfather, though sometimes I'd slip away, my consciousness fracturing, and they'd find me staring at nothing, counting moments in a reality they couldn't see. In 2010, something changed. The other subjects began experiencing what they called bleed-through, memories and experiences from alternate timelines intruding on their daily life. Henderson woke up one morning speaking fluent Mandarin, a language he'd never learned. Martinez built a house using architectural techniques that wouldn't be invented for another decade. Cole wrote a novel that perfectly predicted events that hadn't happened yet. We were becoming unstuck in time, our bilateral consciousness no longer contained to 2 states but spreading across infinite possibilities. The experiments from 1973 were finally bearing fruit, just not in the way anyone had intended. Dr. Webb visited me in 2015. He was ancient, confined to a wheelchair, but his eyes were still sharp. He came to my house in Colorado Springs on a warm September afternoon, accompanied by 2 young CIA officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm dying, Barrett," he said without preamble. "Pancreatic cancer. 3 months, maybe 4. Before I go, I need to know, where are they? Dr. Sarah, the research team, the other subjects who vanished." You know where they are, I replied. You've always known. The between, he said, naming it for the first time. But that's theoretical, a hypothesis. It's real. And you knew it was real when you started injecting us with those compounds. You were trying to create a doorway, and you succeeded. They're trapped there, Webb. 42 years they've been trapped there, unable to die, unable to live, counting moments in a place where time has no meaning. He was quiet for a long moment. Can they be brought back? Why? So you can experiment on them more. No, he said, and for the first time I saw genuine regret in his eyes. So I can apologize before I die. I didn't help him. He died 3 months later, taking his apologies to a grave that would never be marked with his real name or his real crimes. 2020 brought COVID, and with it, a perfect cover for new experiments. The uncounted started disappearing again, pulled back into programs that officially didn't exist. Henderson vanished from his home in Maine. Martinez disappeared from a VA hospital in Albuquerque. One by one, we were being reclaimed. By 2023, only 3 of us remained. Myself, Cross, and Park, though Park existed more in the between than in physical reality. Cross died last month, August 2024. Natural causes, they said, though I knew better. He'd been documenting everything, preparing to break the 50-year silence. His death was too convenient, too clean, but he'd prepared for it. He sent me everything: reconstructed journals, photographs, documents that shouldn't exist, proof of what was done to us. And now, on September 15th, 2024, with my 50-year NDA expired and POW MIA recognition day tomorrow, I'm telling this story. I know they'll come for me. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. They'll find an old man who's clearly suffering from dementia, whose war stories have become confused with delusions. They'll discredit everything I've said, classify this recording, make me disappear like all the others. But here's what they don't understand. I'm already gone. Part of me has been in the between since 1973, existing alongside Henderson and Martinez and all the others who were sacrificed for an experiment that never really ended. My body might die, but my consciousness is scattered across so many realities that I can never truly be eliminated. And I'm not alone. Right now, in the between, hundreds of us are gathering. Not just the Block 7 subjects, but all the experiments from all the programs across all the decades. We're organizing, preparing, because Park was right. Something is coming in 2025. The barriers between realities are weakening, and when they fall, the world will need soldiers who can fight in multiple dimensions. We'll be ready, not as weapons for any government, but as guardians of the threshold, keeping the horrors of the between from bleeding into your reality. It's our penance, our purpose, our eternal service. Tomorrow, when they read the names of the missing at POW/MIA ceremonies across the country, listen carefully. Mixed in with the official readings, you might hear other names that were never on any list, soldiers who were never acknowledged. The uncounted ones who sacrificed not just their lives but their very existence for experiments that history will never record. We're still here, still counting, still standing watch. And for those who say this is just the delusion of a traumatized old soldier, I have one question. If none of this is real, why did the Pentagon classify recordings that don't exist? Why are there redacted files about programs that never happened? Why do 1,584 American servicemen remain missing from a war that ended 50 years ago? The answer is simple. Some of us never came home because we never left. We're still there, in Block 7, in the between, in the spaces between heartbeats and breaths, counting moments until the war that never ended finally comes to its conclusion. My name is Colonel James Barrett, United States Air Force. Serial number 478-44-9823. I was shot down over North Vietnam on November 18, 1968. I was repatriated on March 15, 1974. And I'm still missing in action.